This is Marouen. I am here today to talk to you about Crestal and what we are actually learning about the modular ecosystem and what we do to bring some order to the chaos that is that ecosystem. So a little bit about myself. I am the one next to the line. There is a glass between us. So been working, actually I graduated not far from Belgium, so I'm very familiar with this city. Not a big fan, but it's good enough. Worked a little bit in enterprise software hell, learned a lot about project delivery and how those take time and goals are often not met. Then I worked a little bit on low code, no code, so builders wanting to actually abstract away the tech and what's underlying and go to end results. And after that I made my entry into Web3 by working a little bit on the Insti side on MetaMask, on Infura, on linear ecosystem building, worked a little on Polygon, and I think with this journey, generally speaking, I realized that there is a lot of actually narratives in our ecosystem about infra, tech, building blocks, but has not been an effective way for us to measure whether they are actually delivering what they're promising. And so that's where the idea behind Crestal came from. And so I'll share with you some of the learning we made in the last couple of months and how we want to tackle this, this ecosystem. First of all, when it comes to modularity and building blocks, we are spoiled for choice. So we did like a little experiment, a little tweet that says, I am building a roll-up. These are the building blocks I'm thinking about, and name a few providers to see what am I missing. We started with like 10 categories, 27 providers, ended up with 66 providers across 19 categories. It's like, hey, this is important. You need like shared sequencer. You have to look at this type of doing the Oracle. You have to look at this type of doing DA. You can jump in and add to that category. I'm sure that we're missing certain solutions and options for the builders. The second thing is that each application is unique. And so we have built a kind of like a chatbot that is trained on Web3 architecture. We called it Crestal. And we put this in the hands of builders to tell us what are they building? What do they want to actually achieve as goals? And so we learned a couple of things. First of all, DeFi is always king in terms of like use cases that they want to build, but also there is some seasonal use cases like meme coins. People want to launch meme coins. And so these requirements come and go, and it's important for us to understand what are the building blocks for these new use cases that pop up in the industry. The second thing is that about 74% of builders had already a preconceived idea about which service would work best for their project, which provider, which network, which kind of like a solution that they will use. But then when we drill down, it actually was the outcomes that they were focused about. So when we ask, like, okay, why do you think, I don't know, EigenDA is the way to go? Or why do you think Chainlink is the way to go? Usually it boils down to a performance outcome, to a security outcome, to maybe like a network effect. And so breaking down these and understanding what builders care about is very important for us to help them navigate the ecosystem. The last challenge is actually evaluating these services in a logical and structured way is actually not an easy task. So one other thing that we did at Crestal is that we built a dashboard that looks at different categories of modular services. And we started by looking at data availability providers in particular, looked at the top options in the market, and then we kind of came up with like 20 plus metrics. These are measurable metrics that hopefully can guide decision taken when it comes to selecting one of them. But then the real question is like, how hard is it to collect these metrics? Well, we did a bit of categorization from easy but costs money, to like almost impossible to gather. And most of them are actually on the hard side. And so even actually collecting quantifiable data to make that decision is not an easy thing. And so as you see, actually, we remain victims as builders to perhaps marketing messages, to preconceived ideas, but then it's really hard for us to navigate this way. So that's what we are trying to change, to solve. So how are we thinking about this? Today, when you are building a slide on Google Slides and then transport it, it breaks. But when you're building an application, you're thinking about a modular design, and you're thinking that your backend is quite decentralized, and that will help you achieve your goals, which is good. But essentially what you're doing, you're still working with a centralized operator. So whoever actually selected these services, whoever thought that they are the best ones for the project, it's either your team member, they're limited by their knowledge, by what they know or they don't know. They're limited by the cool swag that they get in a conference, and so it makes them familiar with a particular solution versus another. But then also if it's an external party, like a RAS provider or a consultancy firm, they also are limited by their incentives, by their partnerships, by their work on. And so what we're thinking of doing is actually to break that, whereby we want to crowdsource the architecture, design, deployment, and maintenance of your application. And I'll explain how this works. But ultimately, we want to have the best expert with the most competitive technology piece that fits your use case to have a chance at proposing that to you, and you selecting it and having a relationship with them. So obviously, this, as you can imagine, it would be a bit messy to keep track of. It's like, how do I make sure that this is indeed the best solver for indexing? This is the best solver for RPC. This is the best solver for DA. How do I know that this is actually doing a good job as they promised me? Well, we are thinking about creating like essentially a proof on chain that generates, which in essence is like an L1 chain that has a couple of validators that will go and check whatever was deployed for your project and generate a proof of performance. You were promised a sub-dollar transaction. Is it indeed giving you that? You were promised a 99% availability. Is it indeed giving you that? And this, of course, can then regulate the relationship between you and that provider and make incentives for them to build reputation, to build good services for different players. A bit of visual, so to help you visualize this, I know it's a bigger vision, but first of all is our dashboard. So this is a public's good dashboard that we are collecting different metrics around a couple of categories in DA, indexing, storage, etc. So this allows anybody to go and maybe compare on a high level. And then it gets a little bit interesting where you come to the design assistant to spell out your goals. I am building a DeFi protocol. I want to handle 10,000 users. I want to have 99% availability. What the design assistant will do, it will break down, where is the laser, into what are the modular services you need. For a particular project, maybe you need an indexer on RPC, or you need a DA and an Oracle. And then it will spell out your goals, so your availability goals, your throughput goals, maybe your budget goals. And this creates a well-structured requirements that then goes to a solver marketplace. So you request for essentially solvers to come and deploy these pieces for you. And you'll receive a couple of proposals. Some of them will say, listen, I can achieve those performance goals that you have spelled out, and this is my cost. Some others will say, this is too aggressive. I can give you something cheaper, but then maybe it only meets 90% of the commitments that you're looking for. So the choice is in your hands, and what happens then after that, you can imagine it gets deployed, and then you will be able to monitor what's going on. So this is where the proof of performance chain kicks in, and then you start getting essentially incentives for the solvers to keep running the best services. Competition gets also interesting here, where if there is a better solution out there, somebody can outbid. So you will get essentially a proposal for an upgrade, right? There is a newer version of a particular DA solution, or there is a sequencer of a different type, and I believe that I can do that better for you than your current solver. So that's also possible. So here, the ultimate goal that we want to achieve is that as a builder, you are moving away from what is the exact technology, how do you run it, the complexity of selecting and running it, and then focusing a little bit on your end results, your metrics that you want to achieve as a project, and then have an on-chain transparent marketplace where experts in domains specific to your application can run those services for you. And that's essentially it. So two-sided thing, a dApp, where you as a builder, you can compose different modular services, and then a monitoring layer that will be generating a proof of performance for that service that you have deployed. We are early, so today we're here to meet a couple of projects to help us both test the thesis, to help us build it, to help us, of course, provide services. We have a couple of roles whereby, obviously, you can imagine that is service providers. Today we're working with DA providers, but we want to expand to different categories. There is a role for the solvers themselves who know, how to deploy a particular type of nodes and operate it and commit to a particular SLA. So these are participants in the ecosystem. And of course, there is a lot of partners that we can work with from an integration point of view. We have a little bit of money, so thanks to our investors who are, some of them are in the room. And that's it. You can follow us on Twitter. We have a booth outside. We are distributing some legal rocks. And then there is some cool swag that you can get. Any questions? Happy to answer that.
Yeah, any questions? I think we have a little bit of time before the next talk. Yes, we've got one over there.
Hello, just wondering about the solvers that would be deploying and running these services. How many solvers do you have that are actually providing these services, and how evolved is that ecosystem at the moment?
At this stage, it's actually in the building space. So we are building an SDK that will allow the solver to listen to essentially the requests coming from the builders and then respond with a particular format for the bid. And so we are now testing that SDK, and then hopefully we'll open it up. We still haven't actually hit the right, because there shouldn't be too many solvers and shouldn't be too little as well. And so that will be driven by the demand from the builder side. And so we are focusing a little bit on generating the demand, builders submitting the requests, and that will inform us on what is the right number of solvers. The solvers will be permissioned at the beginning, so we're thinking also there will be a stake to solve, like a reputation stake. But then roughly it's like 5 solvers could be a good starting point. And so those slots are for now open, but we're not pursuing them because we haven't selected exactly the top use case. We're thinking roll-ups is probably the most asked for one right now. And so solvers could potentially be RAS providers who will come and be able to bid. But then the testnet that is ongoing right now is collecting that data from the builders to inform us on what's most in demand in terms of use cases.
And how would you see the economics playing out? Would you see the solvers being able to exist and provide this function as a margin on the services that they're then proposing, or would there be protocol incentives to?
Yeah, so a couple of things. From a solver perspective, you are doing business. And so you're doing business for some builder, you're charging them, let's say, $10,000 per month. If you're doing a good job, you're getting your $10,000. Maybe you missed your performance goal, so you get 8 or 9. So that's your money, that's for you. What happens to that is that will pay for the base services. So that could be, for example, DA token, indexer subscription, it could be some AWS stuff. And so those are where we have some partnerships to subsidize some of that. So that increases initially the margin for the solver, which means you'll be able to solve, and instead of having to pay out of your 10K, pay 8K to the underlying service and keep 2, you'll be able to keep 4. And as you can imagine, it's a network, so you will have to pay the validators for the ecosystem, and there will be the marketplace will have a small fee on top.
Cool, thank you.